Hi, I'm Ben.
And I'm Ernie.
And this is Budget Nerds.
What was all in your mind?
You are not alone.
No, you are not. And today we're going to talk about what it means to save money, but specifically what it means to save money in the context of YNAB, because YNAB kind of blows up people's paradigms around savings a little bit, and I think in a really good way.
Yeah, absolutely. YNAB redefines what it means to save money. I mean, I remember from my earliest days, getting a job, 15 years old, and savings was just all about, okay, I got to take X amount of dollars and then put them in a savings account. Transfer, the actual transfer from checking to savings, I had no idea what that money was for in my savings account, but I just knew it was something I was supposed to do because you're supposed to save money.
Yeah, I think if you grab the average person off the street and be like, what does it mean to save money? Like, put a mic in their face. And maybe we should do that. That'd be fun. What does it mean? You ask them, what does it mean to save money? And I think they would probably say, well, it just means putting money in a savings account, right? And it doesn't have a whole lot of purpose behind it, right? It's just, well, you're supposed to save money because it's a good thing to do, right? So you put money in a savings account. And with YNAB, I think we kind of challenge that because you don't actually have to put money in a savings account to save money in YNAB, right?
Right. It's all about deferring the use of your dollars, of your money.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saving for my internet bill coming up in a couple of weeks. I'm saving for groceries. I'm also saving for insulation in the house.
Yeah. And I think it's more about the purpose of your money. Instead of just randomly saving, it's well, what are you saving for? And so I think by emphasizing, okay, saving money means putting money in assigning money to a savings category. Well, then it's okay, well, which category? You could have a generic savings category, but we try to discourage that because I think it's better to really define it. Like you said, all those specific things. And I think that when people first start using YNAB, it kind of freaks them out a little bit when you put the savings account on budget and all that money shows up in to be budgeted, and people say ooh, I don't want to budget savings, right? And I think the reason why folks say that is because they feel like if they are going to budget money, it means they're getting ready to spend it. Right?
Exactly.
And that nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, you just listed a bunch of stuff that you're saving for. It could even be further. It could be, I'm setting money aside for an emergency fund, and hopefully I never spend that money. Knock on wood, nothing, right? So it just kind of depends on, really, it depends on the category.
And what I'm always telling people in workshops is, the reason we want you to budget those savings dollars is for two purposes. The first is so that the money's there, right? If you have an emergency fund and you're keeping that off the budget, well, you might forget that those dollars are even available to you, or you might not in a stressful time, in an actual emergency, when you're looking through the budget, how am I ever going to pay for this car repair? If the money's not there, you can't see it. Well, that's an anxious, stressful time. But if the money's there, you're like, no worries, right?
It's going to be fine. Yeah.
Everything's going to be fine. I got that money.
Yeah. If you put everything in a generic emergency fund, I think for me, but I think for a lot of people, you still feel stressed out because you still feel like you don't have enough money for that specific thing that's going to go wrong, like the car breaking down. But whereas you might, because you have that emergency fund, but it just gives you a real sense of peace saying that I have money saved for a specific purpose,
And the other reason being to focus your savings even more. And we do this with goals, put that emergency fund. Okay, you have $1,000 in that emergency category. Perfect. Let's try to amp that up to maybe $1,500 or $2,000. You slap a target savings balance goal on that. You say, I want to do this in 6 months, 12 months. And it just helps you focus those savings dollars even more.
Yeah. And what I hear all the time is people are putting money in a savings account because they feel like they should save, but they don't have a really clear purpose for why they're saving. And they always they do this shuffle every single month, right? Where they put money in a savings account and then they run out of money because they're struggling with living paycheck to paycheck, and then they take the money out of savings, and it can almost feel like you are saving money but you're not really making a lot of progress because you keep making this shuffle back and forth. And I think really the cure for that is being really specific about. I mean, the cure for that is budgeting, for one thing, right? The cure for everything is
always everything. Yes, budgeting.
Everything is budgeting. No.
But I'm kind of going through this right now. I think I've mentioned on previous episodes, I've gone back to just a general savings category.
Oh yeah.
Because we just moved into a home and we have some funds set aside for things. And then there's also some other life decisions coming up here that, we're weighing the options. And so we have this pool of money, and I'm always very tempted to take from it because
it doesn't have a name.
Like, it doesn't have a name, and it could go to all these different purposes.
Right. So, well, and that's another thing is like, it's okay for you to take it, and you set that money aside and the reason why you didn't give it a really clear purpose is because you didn't know, because you have this big mystery box of the new house and all that, but it's funny that you feel guilty taking money from there. It's like what I'm hearing.
Well,
to do stuff
I'm
on the
talking
house.
About like for frivolous stuff. I'm tempted.
I was say like you shouldn't feel bad about like taking it for fixing stuff on the house, but
not like that. It's my wife and I just took a few hours. We went to Minneapolis last weekend. And, went to a coffee shop, did takeout at our favorite restaurant, went to an ice cream shop, stuff like that. And I'm like, I could just pull this all from that general savings category.
You could do whatever you want.
But I took it from our trips.
It's just one of those things that's just, there's so many things like this in YNAB where it's just like a little brain hack, by just giving that savings money a really clear purpose. You don't want to draw from it for frivolous stuff,
Yeah.
Like, and be like really specific. Like you could have like a vacation category. And, it's just kind of a general, well, sometime I'm going to take a vacation. But if you call the category Hawaii vacation and have like a little like palm tree emoji and a beach chair emoji, or something like that, you're going to think twice, about taking it from there, because you kind of, you see the trade-offs that like everything's kind of wide out. Your eyes are opened to what you're giving up if you take from there because it's more specific,
Yeah.
I think it makes a big difference. What about this idea of every category is a savings category? I think this is something we talk about a little bit in workshops.
Lee talks about this all the time. Lee, one of our other workshop teachers. Yeah. He's fantastic.
He loves this idea. Yeah. And I think he blows people's mind a little bit in the savings workshop when he talks about this. Because really, okay, so if we redefine what it means to save, instead of saying saving money is putting money in a savings account, if we say saving money is deferring the use of your money for a specific purpose for a later time, the whole paradigm around savings kind of starts to shift a little bit. And if you think about it, really every category is a savings category. It's just a question of how long are you saving that money?
Absolutely. Right? And the focus there is completely on the job of your dollars. It doesn't matter where that money is. It could be in your checking, it could be in savings, it could be underneath your mattress. The purpose, the focus is, what is the job of that money? And yeah, like you said, for my internet bill, well, I'm saving that money, but I'm only saving it for a week because it's going out,
right?
But next Thursday.
You're not using it right now.
Yeah.
So you're saving it, but you're saving it for a week. Or maybe a little bit longer. Like maybe you have a car insurance bill that's due in 6 months. You're saving that money for 6 months. You're still planning on spending it. So in that sense, it's like a spending category, right? But it's also a savings category because you're saving for that for a week, or you're saving that for 6 months, or even further. I mean, you could take this to the extreme. I think probably the biggest extreme is retirement, right? That's like the ultimate true expense. And maybe you're saving that money for 30 years, right? But you're still planning on spending that money when you retire, right?
Yep.
And then maybe if you even have some left over, you can't take it with you into the great beyond after you pass away. So eventually you are going to quote unquote spend that money. It's going to go to somebody else, right?
Very true.
That's a little dark, but
but it's the truth, man.
Right. So yeah, that's so really everything that every decision you make in your budget is a spending decision, and it's also a saving decision.
And so really, practically speaking, every time I get paid or my wife gets paid, we don't care about, okay, transferring X amount of dollars to savings. Like immediately the focus is on those new dollars we just earned. What is the purpose of those?
Yeah, exactly. I think that idea is what kind of freed me from having to worry about my account balances so much. I mean, like, so what was, tell me about your savings testimony with YNAB. Like what has been your experience with kind of embracing this over the years?
So when I came into YNAB, I had multiple savings accounts, you know, the account for the car maintenance, the, you know, Christmas time, birthday gifts, all those kind of things, because
so you were like budgeting basically with accounts,
budgeting with accounts, right? Because we were spending basically everything in our checking account, practically down to zero every month. And so we had to take dollars out and protect them and put them in those different savings category, savings accounts. But what we found is we would always, since we were running so low down to zero, we'd have to transfer money back from savings to checking. And then we would
shuffle,
we would never refill those accounts. And it wasn't working. So when we came into YNAB, I brought all those accounts into YNAB. And then I created a category for each account. So if I had $100 in my Christmas account, I'd have $100 in my Christmas category. And so when I then transferred $50 from checking to savings, I would have to transfer that in YNAB from checking to savings, and then budget those dollars in the Christmas category.
Right. You have to move the money in your budget too.
And I was constantly monitoring the category and the account balance, making sure that they matched.
Did they ever get off? Yeah. Is that what happened to you? Like,
no, I was always monitoring them. So
you're super nerdy with it.
Right. I was on top of it, but I'm like, this is a lot of extra energy and time. And I got to the point where I said, this is enough. And I consolidated all my savings into one savings account. And then I had the multiple categories, but I still put all of those categories into a savings group. And so I was still monitoring category balances and account balance, but this time it was the total of all those categories. So the savings group total, I made sure that matched the savings account total. And then I got to the point where like, I'm still wasting time and energy
to do that whole thing,
making sure these match. And I got to the point where it doesn't matter. And so I took out the savings group. I just put those categories in true expenses. And I found an amount that works for our checking account. Anything above that, I would just transfer to savings. And so now my accounts, they never match any of my categories because they don't need to.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, I have a really similar story. Like I wasn't doing, I don't think I had quite as many savings accounts as you did when you first started. Like I had a few like big savings goals, like a down payment for a house, like saving up for like a baby, you know, those kinds of things. And so I think I had like 4 or 5 savings accounts. And I was doing that when I first started YNAB, when I first started using YNAB as a customer, I tried to match those up. And I don't think I was as vigilant as you because they would always get off over time, like just a little bit or sometimes a lot. And I would end up in the situation where I feel like I lost money because it kind of breaks my brain. It's like so complicated because it'd be like, oh, I have less money showing in YNAB than I have in the account. And so now I got to find money in the budget somewhere to get it into that category. And I feel like I like lost money basically, right? Because I had to take from spending categories that I thought I really had available for spending that I didn't because it was really for this other purpose. And so trying to like match those things up, it was a very frustrating process. And I finally came to realize, it doesn't matter, you know, once you get, especially when you have been budgeting for a little while and the account balance on the checking account, like you don't have to worry so much about like overdraft and things like that because you're saving all this money for true expenses and all that. I started to realize the account balance didn't really matter in the checking account so much.
Yeah.
The only time I start after like using YNAB for about a year or so, the only time I needed to check my account balance in the checking account was for reconciling, to make sure that everything was good with YNAB. But as far as spending goes, I didn't have to check the account balance before I spent. I checked my budget categories before I spent. And so I think that making that shift and realizing, I really have developed this habit of only looking at the category available amounts for spending. I realized the account balance in the checking account didn't matter. And then I could make the leap to, maybe the account balance in the savings accounts doesn't matter so much because I don't have to protect those dollars with accounts. I can protect those dollars with the budget, right?
Yep.
But it still took me a while to start closing some of those savings accounts,
Yeah, there was something about, boy, how do I even phrase this? Because like you, it's just kind of like making my brain hurt when I think back to it. But I remember it being such a large leap. If I had dollars that I knew were in my savings account in a savings category, or there was always, I should say, this fear of what if I spend from my checking account money that I know is actually in my savings account.
Right.
But it doesn't matter, right? Because
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
It's all just one pile of money. And then we organize it by accounts. But what's important is just the job of those dollars.
Yeah.
And where I spend them from, it doesn't matter. Where I keep them doesn't matter.
Yeah, it starts to matter less and less, I think, the more you trust your budget.
Yeah.
That's really, really the key. And eventually you can get to a point, I got to a point where I have accounts for I have like a health savings account and like a retirement account. So I do have multiple accounts that are for a very specific purpose. Like you have to have a health savings account. You have to have that money separate, right? Because of tax reasons. Blah. Boring stuff, right? But right now, I'm not even using a savings account at all.
Right.
I just have one checking account.
But what about interest?
Yeah, what about interest, right? Well, okay, two things there. One, I found a checking account with an online bank that pays pretty good, pretty competitive rates. It's a checking account, but it pays pretty good savings rate. Not as good as it used to because the interest rates have been going down so much, but it's just all right. But then that's another thing. Folks ask well, what about interest so much on savings accounts? And I think there was a time. I'm going to speak specifically about the U.S. because that's where I live right now. I think there was a time when the interest rate on a savings account really, really did matter a whole lot. But for the past 10 or even more years, it doesn't make that much of a difference really because interest rates are so low where it's like I think if you actually do the math and say, okay, well, if I get, 0.5% more return on this $2,000, I'll get this amount. And you end up realizing it's like a cheeseburger every year or something like that. You know what I mean? And I think there's a cost. There really is a cost to getting that interest rate. Because we have to, if you have all these accounts and you're trying to optimize that, you're spending all this time focusing on transferring money, on bookkeeping and all that. And by definition, because you're spending more time on that, you're spending less time on thinking about the purpose of your money or not thinking about money at all, and just living your life. Hello. Right. So I realized that I don't think it's necessarily worth it to worry about the interest rate on a savings account, especially in our current era when interest rates are so low. And instead just make it as easy to handle as possible, right? So I've gone down to where I literally just have one checking account. The checking account has some of my emergency fund in it. The rest of my emergency fund is invested in a like a bond, so it's like super
Okay.
low risk. So that has to be a separate account. But I have some of my emergency fund in there. I have all of my true expenses in there, and I have all my regular bills money in there as well, and it's all mixed together in a big pot. And the budget tells me what the purpose of the money is. So it's just, and I'll tell you, it's just bliss. Like I don't worry about it anymore.
It really is. I mean, I have a similar simple category or account structure, and it's one checking, one savings. I used to have two savings, one at the local credit union where we bank, and then the other in one of those online high yield savings. I mean, high yield in quotes there.
Right.
And I was, regularly moving money to that to try to maximize interest. And I'm just like, this isn't worth it. It's just not worth a cheeseburger every year. Or maybe if I'm lucky, a burrito with guac,
Right.
And the other thing was access to money. So that account was just in my name. If anything were to happen to me at that time, Christy wouldn't have access to that. And if I needed immediate access to that, I couldn't get immediate access to those funds either. So I just simplified everything and I moved them back to my credit union here. Keep it simple.
And the last thing I want, if my car breaks down and I go to the mechanic and they're like, it's going to cost a bunch of money, the last thing I want to have to worry about is, okay, well, I got this amount in my auto maintenance category, so I can spend it, but I can't spend it from checking because I got to do a transfer first. And I got to be sure I do the transfer first before I pay the mechanic. And it's like, I don't want to have to worry about that. I just want to pay the mechanic and get my car back and live my life, And so if you can take out as much of that worrying about transfers as much as you can, I think it really does help.
The only time I have to transfer money from savings to checking is when we have really high credit card bills. And so this is what we experienced when we moved in the house, right? We're buying some new appliances. We're putting a lot of maintenance work on the card. And so those large costs couldn't be covered by our just regular monthly cash flow, with new income. And so then I did have to take a little bit from savings and then transfer that to my checking account just to cover that credit card bill. But that changed nothing in the budget, right? That money was already budgeted for. It had a job in the specific, category. And so it's just making sure I could actually cover that balance.
Yeah. And the only good argument I think I've heard, because I've talked about this a lot, throughout all over YNAB content stuff. The only good argument I think I've heard is, what about fraud? Like if for me, I have it feels like bragging says, but I have a lot of money in that one checking account, right? Because I have next month's budget in there. I have true expenses in there. I have some of my emergency fund in there. And
we know you're YNAB broke, Ben.
I know, exactly. But it doesn't matter. Like, who cares how much money is in that account? It's what matters is the category available amounts, But I'll still quibble over like which can of beans to buy at the grocery store. Right? But so I am starting to feel a little uncomfortable having so much money in one account because if, God forbid something happened and somebody got into that account, it would be a problem if it was like drained all of a sudden, fraud protection is pretty good these days. Like I can trust that. I've had a good relationship with this bank that I use. I can trust that they would quickly resolve it, but it is more risky, to have so much money in one account. So I have been thinking about maybe going back to one checking, one savings just for that reason.
And that's actually the one reason why I do have still two accounts.
It's a good reason. But I am glad I tried it. It's funny because I was writing a blog about this topic and I was thinking about opening one of those, the checking account that I opened. And I had that thought. I was like, oh, what if you could just use one checking account? And I actually I wanted to see if anybody had written about it because, guys, our blog goes back to 2004. It's like, we've written about every topic possible 20 times. You know what I mean? And so I searched up on our site and I found a blog from Jesse from back in 2006 or something, like a long time ago. And he was just like, if I could ever find a checking account that paid a good rate of return, I would just do that and not have a savings account at all. And I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. And I remember, I think I'll have to find that blog for y'all in the description, but I wrote in the blog, I was like, Jesse's dream has come true because it's a thing now, you know? But yeah, so I'm glad I tried it, but I'm thinking about maybe actually splitting the money up a little bit just for the sake of security. That is a good concern. So we'll see. So yeah, that's kind of our thinking around savings. Is there anything else we should talk about, or?
I don't think so. We've covered a lot of ground with savings here. So hopefully I think we're done. Yeah, let's turn it over to the budget nerd community and let's see what they think, what their questions are, their experience with savings accounts and savings in the budget.
Where are you on that journey that Ernie and I went on consolidating accounts? Are you anxious about doing that? Let's talk about it. I'd love to hear more about that. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thanks for listening. And until we see you again, happy budgeting.
Happy budgeting.